In this programme, I've come to a place of extremes. I'm sitting on the edge of the world's largest salt pan in the driest part of an arid continent. I'm in Australia, and I've come here to investigate a tragedy that will have repercussions for all of us who come here looking for adventure. Every year, thousands of cars like this one are rented out to people who want to come out and explore the Australian outback. If you break down on a highway like this, you're going to be spotted pretty quickly. But if you head off of the tarred roads, you're entering thousands of miles of desert, where it's a totally different story.
This is one of the world's great last frontiers. It has a lot of romanticism attached to it. I'm always amazed by the number of people who say, it was like a cathedral. It actually evokes feelings of great spirituality in people.
In this Olympic year, attention is going to be focused on Australia like never before. And that means more people coming to explore not just the cities, but the outback as well. 9 out of 10 Australians live within 100 miles of the coast. The rest of the continent is barren and virtually deserted. But it's more accessible to ordinary tourists than any other wilderness I've been to, and that creates problems of its own.
When I see the tourists coming through in their higher four-wheel drives, I just pray that they're going to be okay. Because I know that the majority of people are inexperienced. They don't have an understanding of how big a country like Australia is and how remote it is. Our patrol area is approximately 500,000 square kilometres. That's about the size of Great Britain twice. So if you're not prepared in this country, you're going to get yourself into some trouble.
It's remote. The temperature regularly tops 100 degrees, and the roads are often no more than tracks of mud or sand. But it's magnificent country, and four-wheel drive vehicles make this accessible to people straight from the plane. Of course, that's the irony, though. They can also get you into places where you can have a lot of trouble.
The bottom line is that when people bog a vehicle and they can't get it out of the bog, it's not a vehicle breakdown. It's a life-threatening situation.
The problem is so great that the police in Western Australia put all their outback officers through this bushcraft and survival course so that they can advise off-road travellers.
One of the old bush methods of working out direction was by what we call the shadow stick. If you draw a straight line between where the shadows have been, then that line is an east-west indicator.
It's something that we've had to do because of the sheer numbers of people that are travelling in the outback and their need to find more and more isolated regions, the need to find places where nobody has been.
Out here you can't just call up the breakdown services, so you have to do your own homework, and the first lesson is don't expect too much when you pick up your four-wheel drive. Now, the hire companies claim that they advise their customers on the dangers of travelling in the outback. They say they tell them to notify the police of where they're going and when they come back, to always stay with their vehicle in case of a breakdown, and about the importance of carrying water in a place as extremely hot as this. But in fact, we've hired our vehicles from 2 different hire companies and never received any of that advice. Outback policemen like Graham Smith despair of that situation, as hire car companies are often the only people who come face to face with overseas travellers. He'd like them to take more responsibility.
I would have thought that it would be mandatory for them to offer some sort of instruction on the capabilities of the vehicle and also the limitations of the vehicle. A minimum of, say, half an hour to an hour's training so that they're satisfied that these people are able to operate the vehicles effectively.
Well, we've taken a few sensible precautions to make sure that we travel safely. For a start, we have two vehicles because we've got a lot of kit and because it's safer. If one vehicle gets stuck, the other one can tow it out. If one breaks down, you still have transport. We've also added a lot of equipment which wasn't available from the hire company, which we've had to beg, steal or borrow. We've got a long-handled shovel like this, which is excellent because you can get right underneath the vehicle in soft conditions. We've got a second spare tyre. That's very important because punctures are common out here and carrying a second one's the easiest way to deal with them. We've also got a pump to reinflate our tyres if we have to lower the pressure to pull out in soft conditions. And just for a few dollars I've been able to add a can of tyre sealant. That's also a very handy way of sorting out a puncture in an emergency. We've also got lots of water. Now, the bare minimum is 5 litres per person per day, but in deserts I like to work on the basis of trying to provide 20 to 25 litres per person. We've got coolant for the engine, very important, oil for the engine, very important, and we've got spare fuel. This is the type of jack most hire cars come with. It's a bottle jack, and they're fine on roads. But when you're in soft conditions, they can be very difficult to get underneath because you have to dig them in. So we've added to that this jack here, working on the principle of two. Two of every piece of equipment that's vitally important. Added to all that is a tow rope. You can't assume that someone who might happen along will have one. And being towed out is the easiest way of becoming unbogged. Well, with all this equipment, we're pretty much well set up and can go most anywhere. But if you're put off by the thought of all this gear, perhaps you shouldn't be going into the Outback, because it's one place not to be taken lightly.
That's been ingrained in people who've been born and bred in this country. They know to treat the Outback with respect. This is Perth in Western Australia. One Friday morning, Russell Lagden left his home near the city with his wife Carol and his 5-year-old son Ben for a long weekend driving to the old mining town of Coolgardie. It's about 300 miles away as the crow flies, but they told colleagues and friends they wanted to use back roads instead.
The plan was to go to a little used track where the old miners used to push their wheelbarrows to the gold mines, and it's been reopened over the last probably 10 years or so, and we thought we'd go up there camping.
The Lagdens had delayed their trip by 2 weeks because a cyclone had washed out the track and they wanted to give it time to dry out.
There's some soft ground.
There's some soft ground, is it?
Even so, they often had to stop while Russell tested submerged sections with a spade to see if they could get through. Their four-wheel drive coped with everything until one of the most remote parts of the track, 125 kilometres from the nearest settlement.
One small thing can really change your whole life. You know, 1 minute you think you're driving through a long puddle and then you're stuck miles from anywhere.
The Lagdens tried to lever the vehicle up and put branches under the wheels to increase the traction. But by the end of the first day, they'd only managed to come this far, about 20 yards. With at least the same amount of distance ahead of them, they resigned themselves to another night in the bush.
It was just probably the most desperate situation I've been in. I think to say scary is trivialising it. There really is no word that can describe the emotion that you feel when you are so isolated.
They did everything they could to make themselves conspicuous from the air. They put up the bonnet of their car and drew an SOS sign in the road. They prepared a signal fire and tested different leaves to see which would create the best signal.
Look at that smoke.
Russell had told colleagues he'd be back at work on the Tuesday morning. When he didn't turn up, his secretary